Malthesus is an icy cold world with no star. Its landmass is frozen over with snow and rocks. A similarly gigantic and still sea marks the planet like a giant river. However, despite first appearances, this place is far from dead. The planet's large size helps keep its atmosphere as well as allowing lava and hot springs, which show hidden geothermic potential and therefore the hidden potential for life. At first I thought these were mineral deposits, but on closer inspection are actually microorganisms, which live by feeding on the stone and heat of the world. An interesting observation is that while the ones closer to the lava are lighter, the ones nearer to the cold are darker. This despite the fact that light offers very little warmth in comparison to the molten rock, showing that sometimes all you need to survive is just a small advantage. Venturing deeper into the planet, I soon found clam-like organisms residing in a hot spring. Taking samples, I began conducting some field work. Calor clams are immobile filter feeders that sustain themselves through absorbing the high mineral content of the water which they bathe in. Furthermore, these animals utilize the heat produced from the hot springs in order to help ease the cellular processes, giving extra energy to an organism that could use all the help it can get. Calor shells, while seemingly tough, are surprisingly frail. Easy to break, as its main purpose is to offer thermoregulation, and since there are no predators of sufficient size that would even be a problem for these clams, keeping their insides at a comfortable temperature while its surface swings wildly from barely above freezing to around boiling as the bubbling vents push them around the pond. The clams are asexual and reproduce by releasing spores, which the adults do constantly. However, for the larval stage to sprout, it appears they would need a surprisingly picky mixture of heat and minerals, let alone for them to grow to a large size. As a result, most die and are consumed by their parents. Strangely, there doesn't seem any way for such a contained ecosystem to exist for an extended period, yet I see no way for the hot spring to have been populated from an outside source. Perhaps other life? Now that we are done exploring the surface in its cold frigid temperatures, we can continue exploring this planet by venturing deeper into its more habitable crust. Eventually I found more Calor clams, telling me that yes, they do indeed exist in multiple tide pools. However, I still don't know how they managed to go from one area of Malthesus to another. Thankfully, most of my questions were answered when I found a gigantic slug-like creature slurping up the slurry through a strange proboscis attached to its head. The first odd thing you will notice about these animals is the black beads on the sides of their head. Despite appearances, they are not eyes. Instead, the dots are closer to birthing orifices where the asexual slugs force out smaller copies of themselves. Navigation follows the fine but sturdy hairs on the creature's skin, capable of picking up the faintest vibrations of running water and molten magma. If the slug is lost, releasing a low, barely audible rumble which acts as a sonar, helps it scout out the area. The proboscis of the slug acts as both a mouth and rectum for the creature. Their importance to the web of life on Malthesus cannot be overstated, acting as pollinators carrying the larval stages of a multitude of different species, including the Calor clams, to different pools, ponds, and hot springs. The nutrient-rich sludges of this area of the planet allow greater and more complex life forms to exist. Here is one such creature, right before us. Mineral helmets are one of the most complex living creatures of Malthesus, even more so than slugs, afforded to them by living around highly mineral-dense soup that is far better at supporting life than the humble waters on which the Calors reside. Although not visible, their method of eating is also highly unusual for the planet. Most creatures filter substance through gills on their body, while the helmets utilize long strings that extend into the broth and pull in large amounts of dissolved rock. Perhaps the most bizarre aspect of their anatomy is the fact that the blood and reproductive fluids of these lithotrophs are combined. Analysis shows that a complex chemical prevents the zygotes inside them from growing. When not constantly maintained, however, the compound quickly degrades, a process accelerated by heat, meaning that all they have to do in order to reproduce is rupture some of their blood vessels. During the end of this exploration, I come across a very peculiar life form indeed. While stationary, this one does not appear to be tied to any specific pond, pool, or puddle. In fact, it appears to be growing right next to some extreme heat. A very geometrically complex organism, the chandeliers, unlike any other life form on Malthesus, is not reliant on liquid water, gaining all their moisture from the air. In a similar vein, these creatures gather all their minerals using mild acids. However, this method of feeding will be their undoing, as once they have degraded the ceilings on which they reside, the chandeliers will plummet, shattering to the ground. But not all is lost for these animals, as once this happens, the spores in their bodies will finally be released, growing once they find a suitable part of the ceiling to cling to. We have explored Malthesus, and while many more secret life abounds, we have overstayed our visit. I hope one day to return here and continue exploring.